Oh,
Hello, everyone. This is Trip, and I'm here with my buddy Tim Whitaker, and this is our first live stream for the God of Justice online class, which I know many of you are in. Y'all have sent in some amazing questions
yep.
for us today. Before we jump in, I thought, and Dom hops on and starts answering questions and such. I thought, since this is a little class put together, me and Tim, just to kind of intro it. So Tim, maybe you can share a bit about briefly about the class, where we're going for. Then I can say whatever, I don't know, detail things we need to make sure we get it introed, and then we can hop on and start tackling questions and such.
Trip, I'm not going to mince words, okay? I'm from New Jersey. We just speak
Oh,
bluntly. So here's the TLDR. Our world has gone to shit. And I'm wondering where the hell is God in all this shit? I mean, for real. That's the general premise that I think sparked this class for you and I. I've been thinking so much like, where is God as bombs are being dropped on the heads of children in Gaza? Where is God as one of the most dehumanizing regimes kidnaps our immigrant neighbors and puts them in concentration camps? Where is God? Because the God that I was introduced to as a white evangelical fundamentalist seems to be condoning those actions. And so what am I doing here as a Christian? And that's the honest truth. Like, I have real questions. Where is God? Where's the God of justice in a period in human history that just seems overwhelmingly unjust? And
mm-hmm.
that's why we're doing this class.
Yeah. And so the different features of the class are these live streams we'll be doing, but also we have a number of different like pre-recorded lectures from the different scholars that range from different disciplines. So like obviously Dom, legendary New Testament scholar, and Pete Enns, who's a Hebrew Bible scholar. So that you have Bible stuff to then ethics and theology, history. So the all of you that sign up and join, which you can donate anything between $0 and $1 million at faithandpolitics.net. If you sign up there, then you'll get access to the resource page, and we'll be putting the lectures for the different Q&As. Then you send questions, which we got sent a whole bunch of questions today. And I know Dom is in mid-process of getting on, because last time we did classes on Thursday, and he's like, I thought it was on Thursday. He goes, oh, no, it's on Friday. So, yeah, he's going to the internet. But the other thing before we hop in, and I think that I'm excited about, is both you and Dom are going to be at Theology Beer Camp this year in September or October.
Cannot wait.
And last time Dom came to Theology Beer Camp, his plane got delayed and rerouted, and it took like 2 days to get there. And then he was jet lagged, talked, and left. So this year, we're hoping, fingers crossed, that airplanes cooperate, and he's there and able to hang out and such. But yeah,
Can I say that one of my favorite things about beer camp? I mean, there are several. There are two things that I look forward to about beer camp. Number one is I get to see people that I talk to or engage with online, yourself included, Trip. And it's always nice just to be embodied for a few days and hang out and just have a good time. But the other thing is, people who might know me or not know me, I come from like this evangelical fundamentalist paradigm, right? Where I was kind of taught like it's all or nothing about God, either liar, Lord, or lunatic kind of theology. And when you deconstruct that, I admit, like, it's very challenging to kind of reconstruct some kind of view of God in the Christian framework that is compelling, like I said earlier, in a time where injustice really reigns. And it is such a privilege and also a reminder to be able to sit around scholars and folks who have thought deeply about these questions, and also who know the Bible better than maybe anyone on the planet, and just kind of think about things in a more complex and nuanced way. Because I think even for folks who might lean more progressive, I think we all can fall into the trap of binary oversimplifications on the internet about like what God is like and where God is or isn't. And it is nice to kind of sit and think about the complexity of such a question while watching someone like Dom or like Pete Enns, or insert your favorite scholar here. So it's just a great time to meet new people, hang out with people. For those who like alcohol, you get tons of beer. For those who like coffee, like myself, they also provide that. Thanks to me, by the way, I did that for all of you out there. And it's great to be able to think deeply about things that
Oh, what Tim means is the first time he came to camp, he and his producer at that point, Noah, did a podcast after the first day, and they said all sorts of nice stuff, followed by complaining about the quality of coffee that mainline Protestants serve when they get together.
It was shit. What can I say? It was terrible.
And there I am, finally going to bed at 1 a.m, listening to this podcast, and I'm like, all right, I guess I'm going to get up early and get better coffee. I don't like we practice a really welcoming and affirming community, at camp. And if people with evangelical baggage need higher quality coffee in order to talk to the Lord, then we'll get it.
I mean, Trip, imagine coming to like some, evangelical progressive conference, right? And they're like, yeah, we're going to have beer for all you beer drinkers. And they have like Blue Ribbon.
Pabst?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't.
Or like Miller Lite. Would you be like, wow, yeah, these guys really know their beer? No. You'd be like, what the heck is this?
Yeah, but because, Tim, for some of us at Theology Beer Camp, the coffee is really there to get us to lunch when the taps turn on. Like it's that's all it is.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, fine. What can I say? Well, for me, it's great. I mean, the coffee has been majorly upgraded. I'm excited for it. Beer camp is one of my favorite things to go to. I even skipped our biannual Friendscation last year to go because I love it so much. So, and I'll be there again in Minneapolis.
Yeah. So, okay. While Dom's trying to find, get on the internet and stuff, there are two questions.
I love Dom.
There are two questions that came in. I didn't put on our list because they weren't directly for Dom. They're more for you.
For me?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. It was kind of funny.
That's good.
Well, you're gonna find out.
Oh God.
One, and I assume it is slightly in jest. I can't verify, but it was. I find they was like, Trip, do you feel like you've led Tim down a slippery slope to moral relativism and progressive wishy-washy Christianity because now he's playing with you and Dominic Crossan on the internet? And Tim like that is the story my family tells about me. Now I was interested in this stuff, and I wonder what has it been like for you to start right with these experiences about justice that started when you started New Evangelicals. Like, hey, here's the God y'all were talking about. Here's what it is you're doing. WTF? How have you learned to talk and try to communicate that this, like the transformation you've gone through, has really come out of your experience and encounter with God, the message of Jesus, that kind of thing, versus, like, what do you do when you're being dismissed? And yeah.
Wow. Well, thanks for the question. So a lot of my work.
All right.
Whoa. My bad. Never mind.
Hey, Dom appears. I asked him one question.
We get this stoned.
I love it. Tune in next week for the answer.
Yeah, you'll get
Sign
that
up for
one
the
there.
class.
Hey, Dom.
All right. Sorry, people.
Oh,
hey,
it's
Dom.
It's all
Sorry,
good.
just got the link.
No problem. Well, we already did all the intro stuff, and so we're ready. We're ready to jump in with questions. And I thought, since Dom and I have talked on the internet for 40 some hours at this point, that I'd let Tim start with the opening question. Then I pulled a few that are kind of, it will help you clarify what you talked about in the lecture, and then we can move on. So Tim, why don't you go ahead and kick things off?
Cool. Dom, great to see you again. I'm looking forward to this. Maybe we could just start big picture for a second for the audience. Maybe some folks didn't get a chance to watch your lecture. Can you just kind of give a brief definition of how you think about distributive justice and kind of set the stage for what we're gonna get into today?
All right, let me begin with something that's crucial for me. And it may sound like quibbling about words, but it really isn't. Justice, when it's said without any adjectives, somebody crying on the television, I want justice, and you listen to the story, and maybe a child has been killed, and you understand it completely. They're talking about retributive justice. Somebody has to be held accountable. And yeah, we're nodding our heads. But you couldn't have retributive justice unless punishment was distributed fairly. So the basic meaning of justice, logical, not biblical or anything else, logical, is distributive justice. Whatever we're talking about, if we're giving out books, it's books. If we're giving out punishments, rewards. If it's not distributed fairly, then it isn't justice. So when the Bible cries out for justice, they're not, please God, punish me fairly. No, they're talking about distributive justice. If it happens to be in a court situation, then of course, retribution must be fair. So the fundamental understanding in the Bible, in logic, in life, for the word justice is redundantly distributive justice. That's my crucial. That's where I begin with. And if you're getting into the Bible and you're hearing justice as God will punish you fairly, don't worry. Ordinary people aren't crying out for fair punishment. They might be crying out for mercy or forgiveness. So distribution is what we're after. And that's the core of my whole thing then. When I look at creation, so the first half of my lecture is on creation. And by creation, I mean the first creation account in Genesis, to be very precise, 1:1 to 2:4a. We really messed that one up when we divided it up. It's the first account. And what I'm insisting on there is the distributive justice of God. It's not a law, a suggestion, a proposal, a commandment. It's the very nature of God. Therefore, what God's doing in the creation is distributing God's own self, let there be. So the whole thing is, I almost said corroded, no, is infused with distributive justice, which is the very nature of God in general, for everything. Now, when you get through all the let there be's and get to us, as I said, we are not the crown of creation or the work of a late Friday afternoon. The crown of creation is the Sabbath. We, however, have been distributed fairly with the image and likeness of God. That's our identity. That's who we are. To run the world for God as stewards, if you will, our agents, our bailiffs, or whatever, according to the Sabbath, which is how would I put this? Which is making creation march to the drumbeat of justice, distributive justice. So that's the first major issue I'm bringing up. That's the first half.
Yeah. That actually relates to one of the questions we came in from Elena, who asks, the Sabbath seems central to your entire argument. You call it the crown of creation. Can you articulate why the Sabbath is so much more than a day of rest and how it becomes the organizing principle for everything from the Sabbath year to the Jubilee?
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Elena, because for most people, when they hear Sabbath, including myself, it's this nitpicking thing. You can go this, you can't do that. Can you play soccer? When I was growing up, everyone wants to say Sabbath, Schmabbath. It's awful stuff. We've lost its meaning. Now, when you look at it there as the crown of creation, because the whole structure, any kid who reaches the age of reason and says, excuse me, if God's this all-powerful person you guys keep talking about, you keep talking about, dear pastor, why couldn't God say, let it be? And, the whole universe in one sentence. Why does God have to go day by day and then get so exhausted that God needs a day off? I mean,
Right.
what kind of a God are we talking about? So, wait a minute. It's obvious to the thinking kid who's reached the age of reason, which will be squelched immediately, of course, that this is a setup. God sets up creation in 6 days so that the Sabbath, the rest, can be the crown of creation or the climax of creation or the grand finale or the consummate. And that makes sense then when you go to rest. Okay, everyone gets rest. Now, that's nice, rest is nice. But wait a minute, everyone gets it. So even your draft animals get it when we read the law of the day of rest. Your slaves, your children, your draft animals, your chickens, even the resident alien in your towns. This isn't about rest, it's about the equal distribution of rest. Any Roman aristocrat would say, of course, otium is what the Romans call it. Otium is what we all want. Negotium is for those others out there who have to work for a living. We love otium. Good for God. Everyone gets it. And that goes then from the day of rest into the year, the Sabbath year, to the Sabbath Jubilee. So if I may put it this way, time, obviously, and place, matter and energy marches to that beat of the Sabbath drummer. Everything. I mean, you're terribly orator if you happen to be in Israel, in Jerusalem, say in a hotel on the Sabbath day, how everything, even your elevator works according to the Sabbath. So leaving out all this Christian and Jewish nitpicking about what you can and can't do, the core of it is that creation, and that means everything, marches to the beat of distributive justice, and it ain't a rule or a suggestion, like red lights in Florida. It's just a suggestion of God. It'd be nice if you guys were just. No, it is the nature of the cosmos, which means, dear customers, go do what you want, but don't be surprised if it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Run your car with Coca-Cola instead of gasoline, but don't be too surprised if it really doesn't work.
Okay, I have a question, and this might sound, I don't know, maybe silly, but I think I have to ask it. When you talk about this idea of distributive justice, whenever I hear the word justice, what I think about is something went wrong and has to be corrected. But if we're talking about a world that God sets up before the fall, so to speak, where really nothing is wrong, what exactly are we talking about with this idea of justice in the creation account, right? Why would there need to be distributive justice in a world before sin or before, whatever you might want to call it, human chaos, etc.? And can you kind of maybe expound on your definition of justice, or maybe the biblical concept of justice and how it's talked about?
Yeah, well, now I may have to get into some source criticism here. It wouldn't make sense to me if I'm imagining somebody, as it were, writing the whole Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Come on now.
Right.
There's two accounts here. We can obviously see the difference between them. Anyone, again, for a 7-year-old who's been careful about listening, what's going on here? You have to say that at an historical point in time, the Bible was being assembled, and the people who assembled it, and they were the priests, because at that time the intelligentsia or the elites came in two categories: the royal and the sacerdotal, shall we say, the temple and the palace. So somebody decided that when we assemble this Bible, we're going to put let me use my term, a first creation account up to make certain that you guys read the whole thing properly. It's like the glasses, we're putting on glasses on you so you won't be able to see it wrong. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. It's where source criticism isn't just, a game for scholars. A certain point in time, they got to assemble the Bible. You want a year, say the year 500 under the Persians, and they got to write this first creation, to put it up front. So I'm reading everything through that lens, and I'm watching what is there and what's not there.
Mm.
And that's very important to me because, most of us read the second creation account. We read it, I think incorrectly, as punishment, sin, disobedience, none of which is in there, by the way. And the good old Bible isn't the least bit diffident about saying disobedience, punishment. So the fact it doesn't mention it there, the second creation account, and in Jewish history, it's never used as you really want to know disobedience. Let's start with Adam. I want to put a fullest possible emphasis on that first creation account as put in deliberately at a point in time to control the whole, as it were. That's crucial for me.
Okay. You have to, for a former evangelical who's only been formed so deeply by that kind of idea, this is really helpful because, a lot of people who might like deconstruct that kind of view have a hard time replacing it with something else, right? Like, okay, we know that maybe Genesis, the creation accounts, so to speak, are two different stories or something deeper going on, but what exactly is going on? And one of the questions that I wanted to ask, that someone asked, I also had the same question, was from Carlos. And Carlos said, you make a striking claim that original sin is about violence, not sexuality, and that it first appears in Genesis 4, not Genesis 2 and 3. Can you lay out this argument and explain how this reframes our understanding of human brokenness and redemption? And I got to be honest, I was shocked too, because my whole life I was taught that, especially Genesis 3, the whole temptation in the garden, that's when, quote unquote, original sin enters the world. Adam and Eve, quote unquote, disobey God. There's a curse that comes on them. So can you kind of dive into this a little bit and help us reframe it?
And thank you, Tim and Carlos. No, it's very helpful. This is the second half of my talk because I'm really setting up creation in Genesis 1 against civilization in Genesis 4. And I'm not saying when I'm picking out these two little bits and playing them against one another, I'm that clever. No, I'm saying that the person who was doing this, person who wrote Genesis 4, knew exactly what they were doing. Knew exactly what they were doing and the matrix in which they were doing it. So let me talk about it. First of all, just negatively for the moment, somebody could argue with me, but just the word sin, the word disobedience, the word punishment, as a fact, is never used in the Eden story. Now, you could say, well, it's all latent there. Fine, but it's not there. Secondly, the whole Hebrew tradition, which I said is quite ready to talk about divine punishments and even blame themselves that we've been sinners, you read it in the Psalms. They usually start in the desert. I don't know anywhere where it says, now it all began with Adam, and after that it was all downhill. In the Jewish tradition, what Adam did was give us inaugural bad example. Yes. He was the first, and even the most they will say was he gave us bad example, if they want to go that way. So let's hold on to that. Now, going more positively to Genesis 4, it is literally the first time the word sin appears in the Bible. That's a fact. Secondly, God is talking to Cain. Of course, this is the story of Cain and Abel. God, and by the way, I'm showing it behind me. You can see to the screen there. That's Cain with his cudgel upraised, and poor old Abel is behind my shoulder. But that's the first time sin is used. And God says to Cain, not now, I know this is sin and you won't be able to do. He tells him it's kind of like a feline beast crouching outside the tent flap, waiting for you to come out and go to spring on you. But you know that you can beat it. So sin is not an intractable genetic trait that you're stuck with. It just isn't. Cain is responsible, and he's told that. Now, that's for me civilization, because as you know, the brother god in Sumerian, thousands of years ago, in Sumerian mythology, the herder god or the shepherd god and the farmer god, the Muzu and Nkimdu, now they don't kill one another. The Sumerians, at least, they debate who is the better. They're debating herding, herding or shepherding against farming, which is a fair debate for them to be having. They're doing it by saying who's worthy to marry the goddess Inannu. And at the end, they work it out. Okay, I let your sheep come near my river on my farm. They work it out. Now, the Bible, I think, is more accurate. What is it in Oklahoma? The cowboy and the herder will be friends. Is that it? What's that? The cowboy. But that's the same debate. It's the farmer, the open range against the closed range. So this is something big. Now, the guy who is writing 4, and this is the Yahwist. This is not the priestly. This is the royal elites. They're telling this story. And they have the brothers. Cain is the firstborn. Abel is the secondborn. Let's get into how that happened. If you ask somebody like a writer in the ancient world, how come that happened? They say, oh, get a life, for God's sake. It's a story. It's a parable, dummy. Anyway, Cain is the elder. And of course, he offers a farmer's gifts to God. Abel is the herder, offers a herder's gift to God. God chooses Abel. Now, the reason God chooses Abel is because God is the great counterculturalist. In Genesis, he always goes for the younger son because culture goes for the older son. It's not anything about the sacrifice itself. It's about, I always go with the younger son just to teach you guys a lesson. So then, of course, Cain decides to kill Abel. And we saw that can be, and he does kill him, of course. Now, here's where it gets really interesting for me. We really expect God to punish him. We really do. I mean, he should. And what God does is mark him so there'll be no punishment tribe on tribe. You're imagining tribal warfare in the desert. Mark him so this won't escalate. Okay, you killed our Abel. We're going to kill 5 of your guys. You killed 5. So God marks him. God is trying to stop escalatory violence. Now, I'm hyphenating that word. Not just violence, quid pro quo, escalatory violence. And as the text continues, and it does, to Lamech, 5 generations later. Lamech is the descendant of Cain, and it's through him that civilization arrives. Well, I should say, of course, Cain builds the first city, which isn't great. Maybe the cities are a problem, and problem especially for the herder and the farmer, especially for the farmer, maybe now. So as you go through this, civilization is equated with escalatory violence in the same way that you have, let me hyphenate it, distributive justice, hyphenate that so you can't separate it, escalatory violence, put that together. Because Lamech says, you strike me, I kill you. You got this 70-fold for Cain, 70 for me. I couldn't be clearer. This is a celebration of civilization as escalatory violence. And by the way, there is a medieval legend, it's not in the Bible, of course, but it shows human dissatisfaction. Cain's got to get it. So the story is that Lamech is a hunter and he's blind now, and his son, Tubal-Cain, takes him hunting. Again, don't worry about it. It's a parable, dummy. So he hears a rustling in the bushes, sends his arrow in, and who does he kill? Cain. Don't worry about 5 generations and all the rest. He kills Cain. So we finally got vengeance for us, and we're happy now. So I'm setting up in the Bible deliberately this distributive justice against escalatory violence. And I don't think I'm putting it in there. I think I'm seeing it where it is. Sorry, that was a long answer. Sorry.
Thank you.
Well, there's a couple points that just to, especially for those this kind of biblical reading is new for, and you can clarify if I'm getting this wrong, but if the priestly source, right, there's a number of sources that were used when the people of Israel brought together, edited, and wove the text that are the Torah. And at the very beginning, the source, the priestly source, first creation story is on the first day, let there be, let there be, let there be, right? And there's this beautiful account of creation. The crescendo is the Sabbath. And then that same source, when it talks about the human predicament and what the problems we bring into the world, where sin isn't the deception that happens in Genesis 3, isn't what we use sin. It's the violence that happens in Genesis 4. And
not the same source.
No, I meant the priestly source of Sabbath is the Genesis 1 versus.
Yeah.
So like when Dom said 2:4a, for those that don't know, 2:4b is the beginning of the second creation story, right? Dirt and the breath of God makes Adam, and then Adam's like, I got a rib, Eve. That's that story. So there are two stories. They're edited there, and then it starts the kind of snowballing effect of human brokenness from the deception in the garden to Cain and Abel to Noah to Babel, and right, and the kind of snowball of sin gets bigger. Something I'm like just noticing that when you're bringing together sources, what Dom's, I think it's an important observation is they weren't haphazard. It wasn't like they grabbed these sources and threw them in a bucket and said, here's the Bible. It's like, why would the people of Israel, a people formed coming out of Exodus, begin the story of creation that crescendos in the Sabbath? Why? There's an obvious point, and this is something Walter Brueggemann, who's done lots of work on the Sabbath as well, points. The biggest distinction for the people of Israel's God is that this is the one that brought them out of slavery from a God who said, build more bricks, and says, no, you get Sabbath. And so much Sabbath, like Dom pointed out in the lecture, you don't even get to pick up manna when you're wandering in the desert on the Sabbath. You get to pick up 2 days the day before, because the law I'm giving.
Happy birthday, Trip.
Yeah. The law I'm giving isn't one that demands that. And so that's the kind of reading there in Genesis I found real helpful. In something I hadn't noticed till going back reading it after the lecture, is in the Genesis 3 story, Adam and Eve hide from God. In Genesis 4, after the mark of Cain's given, the line before he went and started the first city is, and he went away from the Lord. Right. So there's like one way of distancing from the divine is just hiding. Another is I went away from the Lord and started it. And so when we think that Sabbath is this crescendo that sets in contrast the justice of the God of Israel, who heard their cries in slavery and came, in contrast to Pharaoh, then you see that contrast of civilization and the invitation to Sabbath right there in Genesis, where that story of escalatory violence begins when Cain walks away. It says he went away from the Lord.
Let me pick up one thing. People might be thinking, oh, this sources stuff, it's all fuddy-duddy scholarship. It's no important. Let me try and simplify it. People say, scholars say, there's 4 sources to the Pentateuch, first 5. Now, again, our 7-year-old who just might say, excuse me, how come there's 4 and not 3 or 5? Well, because there's 2 elite sources, the palace and the temple, keeping records. They have to be able to read and write and count, especially count taxes. Okay, so there's 2. But then Israel splits into northern and southern kingdoms. So we have 4. We have 4 sources, 2 from the north, 2 from the south. That's where we get it. It's not mysterious. Second point to understand is this assembly has been done under the Persians. Now, the Persians represented almost an ecstatic moment or ecstatic moment in Israel's history. Just read Isaiah suggesting that, the second Isaiah, of course, suggesting that the Messiah is Cyrus. He sent us home. He subsidized the trip, sent us home to assemble our Bible, because that's our law. So, wow, the world looks good today. The Assyrians are gone. The Babylonians are gone. The Persians are here. Now, they don't know that Alexander's coming and the Romans. They don't know that. There's this moment when they can imagine a much more just world, to put it bluntly. I think that's also the matrix of this is coming. And that has to be understood. So they can have this magnificent moment where we're made in the image and likeness of God. And if we just go out and do it, all will be well. And they never say, but I'll say it, if we don't do it, we will not be punished. Because if you think you're a bird and try to fly from a high building, God will not hit you with the pavement. You are not a bird. Will not work. So sanctions don't have to be mentioned. It's irrelevant. You just know you can't do it. So that's the vision of this moment. And it is, of course, picked up in chapter 5, by the way. So you end up with us created in God's image and likeness. And then you get into the Yahwist source, which is the royal source. Much earlier, goes back to maybe the 900s. The priestly source is from the 500s, round numbers. And then you pick it up in chapter 5 again. So to be honest with you, I absolutely love reading this stuff word for word because I'm watching human minds at work. And that's what enthralls me. Wow, I think I know why you did this weird thing of creating light on the first day. You had darkness, but you needed to have a day. How could you have a first day, a second day, a third day if you didn't invent day and night? So you knew about the fourth day would be the sun and the moon and the stars. You weren't a jerk or an idiot. But you had to have day and night on day one or you can't get your story rolling. I see you at work. And I see you at work because you've got 8 chunks of stuff, but you can't have God resting on the 9th day. So you got to get your 8 chunks of stuff crammed into 6 days. So let there be 2 letter B's, third day. Let there be 2 letter B's on the 6th day. I can see you at work. I know what you're up to. It's like reading my own book when it comes back from my editor. And I'm trying to figure out why he's saying all the things, why he didn't like that, why he liked this. Okay. After a while, I see, I know what you're up to. And I find that to be an ecstatic feeling. I think I know I can acknowledge what you're up to.
This is helpful for sure. It's definitely, breaking my brain a little bit, thinking about these things differently, which I really enjoy. And for me, a lot of this stuff, I always like to get down to well, pragmatically, what does this mean? Like, how are we to take this for today, et cetera? And Diego, I think, asked a really good question I think is worth having you kind of flesh out. So Diego says, and Tripp, this is question 17 that I messaged you. Diego says, you advocate for distributive justice, but what does this actually look like in practice? Are you calling for socialism, democratic socialism, or something else entirely? And I think this is kind of the crux for a lot of us. It's like, okay, if the Bible has this idea, or if this part of the scriptures or the Bible has this concept of distributive justice, it sounds great. Like, what are we going to do with it now, though, right? Like we're so many years past when these things were written in their context. Yeah. So what would that look like today?
Okay, now, Diego, please don't be offended what I'm going to say now. I want us to be very careful. I'm talking to myself as well, that we don't kill immediately something by immediately want to know how to do it. Because first we have to decide, should it be done? And I've been a lecturer long enough and given talks long enough that I almost am waiting immediately for the question, how?
Yeah.
As if we have already accepted that. Because when you accept that is necessary, you have no alternative but to figure it out. And no, Diego, I do not have any great solution. At a moment when we're watching, we might have thought that, maybe somehow democracy or capitalist democracy or whatever we want to call it was actually working. Now we can see in the Bible the worst thing they could imagine, the worst thing, the most dangerous thing against distributive justice was war. That they got to all right. Now, they didn't even get to escalate. Well, maybe the new escalatory war, because, as I said, they'd gone from the In Daniel, they knew how to go from the Babylonians to the Medes to the Persians to the Greeks and the Romans. Yeah, they knew about escalation. But war, we already have two other alternatives besides war. We already know, let's call it climate control for short, that we've been assaulting our world since we came out of Africa 70 to 100,000 years ago. We know that. That's the second whole thing. If today we had the most peaceful world you could ever imagine, war was as unthinkable as anything else, we would then be watching something that's just lapped us. The world, taking care of the world, our other species. We have at least two other ways that threaten our species, sustainability. So I want us to really ask, do we believe this is right? Or is this just a quaint idea from Crossan, or a weird idea from the Bible at the most? And we don't believe in the Bible, let us say that. And it's coming from God, so I don't believe in God, so I don't care about this.
Right.
I want to say, I'm not hearing this coming from God. I'm hearing this, to put it bluntly, if you want to say, coming from evolution too. I see it. I don't just believe it. I can see it. If you said, well, could I take out God and just use the Bible as an ancient philosophy text like Plato and Aristotle, and we're reading them on the same level to say, have the anything for us? And I would be saying, oh yeah, I really do. I think they're right. Now, could we accept it's right? Because if we can dismiss it as socialism or some other term that we know hasn't worked, socialism hasn't worked, communism hasn't worked. Now, the deadly fear we have right now is that democracy hasn't worked either, because we figured out how to beat it. It took us a little while, but with the aid of television and everything else,
the
possibility of lying taking over from truth, then we could figure we could beat this too. So maybe what we've got is the victory of Genesis 4. Escalatory violence is the fate in all its dimensions, by the way, not just war, but climate control, other species, everything. Maybe that is the answer to the basic question I'm asking. We are not a sustainable species, a glorious species, but so was the saber-toothed tiger if he wasn't coming at you for breakfast.
Are you saying that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like out of these different models of thinking about justice and what and types of human behavior, escalatory, violence seems to be the one that continues to win out among the human species, right? Like we keep escalating. I mean, and actually, someone asked this question, so maybe it's a good time to ask it. This is question 5 from Jasmine. She says, your concept of escalatory violence seems crucial to diagnosing civilization's fundamental problem, which I would agree with. Can you define this term precisely and explain how you trace this pattern from Cain through Lamech to modern weapons of mass destruction? And that's kind of what got me thinking about it, is that, there is like this altruism of like, oh, what a world we could create, right? Where distributive justice reigns supreme. But it seems like humanity, for whatever reason, wants to create a world of escalating violence where our weapons get more deadly and we can kill more people more easily. Now, not even needing other humans to do it, right? We can send robots in. So we'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on this question.
Yeah. And maybe somebody might say, well, we get better at lots of things, and so we just get better at killing. I mean, I don't know if it's fair. Look how we're talking to one another now through computers and everything else. Yeah, right. We're getting better at lots of things, and I rather love it, to be quite frankly with you. So maybe this is just one more thing that we're getting better at. But for example, I tossed in, it's not original with me, it only took us 3,000 years to get from iron swords, beyond the bronze swords that broke when you did much, but an iron sword to an atomic and a thermonuclear bomb. Wow, we're good. I mean, that's 3,000 years. And if you want to push it, we got from the Wright flyer at the beginning of the last century to this stealth bomber by the end of it. I'm not criticizing for the moment. I'm saying we're fast. We're fast. And if you want to say, well, we're fast with everything. Okay, fine. So we're fast maybe with what we do to the environment. So I am asking us to face this and to see, and to put it bluntly, what the heck does a church or a temple or a mosque think it's doing? If we want to worship God, what's to stop us worshiping God in the privacy of our own home? Why do we have to gather? Why don't we have a dining room, a bedroom, a prayer room? And we all know we have our own traditions.
Mm-hmm.
We come together to do something. Paul would say it. Jesus would say, don't you get it? You're organizing. What are you organizing? Quietly against, for them, the Roman Empire, which was the normalcy of civilization first century in a toga. And they would say, what are you doing? You organizing? You say to worship? God was, I don't want your worship if it's just worship. That's for pagan gods who are insecure. I want your emulation. I want your participation.
Right.
I want your collaboration. I'm waiting. But feel free not to do it. So I would ask us if there's any truth in this, to face it or to recognize it's an honorable recognition. No, we prefer this way. And we recognize and it makes us a doomed species. But, it'll be good for a while. We might get away with it for a while.
Do you think it's fair to say that one of the themes, at least in the Hebrew Bible, maybe it continues on, is that humans have the choice every day to either be a steward or a co-creator with God of order and of love and peace, or an agent of chaos that maybe brings hell on earth? Is that a theme that we see? Because you mentioned that, I think, in your talk, and I see it in some of the questions here. And putting my cards on the table, one of the first podcasts I listened to that really got me thinking differently about this was the Bible Project with Tim Mackey and John Collins. Okay. And one of the things that Tim Mackey says a lot, he's also a Bible scholar, is that, there's this concept of God wanting partners or agents, right, to kind of manage his good earth or their good earth and their good creation. But humans, because we have free will and whatever else, also have the option to bring hell on earth and to destroy what God has called good. I think that origin idea, that mythology, I think helps me make sense of the kind of the duality we see in the human experience, right? Because you're right. In 3,000 years, we have created the nuclear bomb, and in 3,000 years, we've created vaccines that have saved hundreds of millions of lives from viruses that used to kill people, right, et cetera. So I kind of see this idea of people choosing to use their lives to either do this partnership with some kind of spirit that wants human flourishing to go on and to take care of the planet and those around us, or people who really maybe want more chaos on earth for their own pleasure or own gain.
Yes, and here's what I love about the Bible. That's not like, well, here's the good book over here and it's all good, and here's the bad us over here. No, what I loved when I was doing how to read the Bible and still be a Christian, really studying the Bible as a whole. I'd never really done it before. Said, forget Old Testament, New Testament, starts in Genesis, goes to Revelation. Let me look at this whole story. What fascinated me all the way through now was that every time God or Jesus or Paul, if you want it, came up with some magnificent idea, saying the same thing, basically. Paul's talking about a new creation. No, what's new about it? The old or the new creation in Genesis 1 is the one we're talking about. Every time we get that, and we get it again and again, all the way through to Revelation, what we watch is people, not evil people, ordinary people, us, saying, okay, now, how do I beat this? I've just admitted it. How do I subvert it?
Right.
Torah wouldn't have to keep Torahing if it wasn't that as soon as we say, you can't do this, well, if I can't buy and sell land, or how do I get yours? Since that's what it's all about. I mean, come on. Civilization is about keeping mine and getting yours. We know that. So you got this crazy law in Leviticus, the land belongs to me. You're all tenant farmers and resident aliens. That's no way to run an economy. Well, you mean we're in charge, but we can't sell like a steward? So I'm fascinated by watching us 2,000 years ago doing what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
This is the vision, splendid. It's on our way, attended, but that flash from Wordsworth. How do I get around it? Now, I'm honest enough, and this is the glory of the Bible, and I mean it. The glory of the Bible is it tells the truth and then lets you watch us subverting it. The Bible itself, it's in there. All the way to Jesus, of course. So we get the Sermon on the Mountain. That's no way to run a country. So we want Jesus to come back on a war horse and take care of the situation. So Paul, the same way. Paul has his vision, so we have the post-Paulites. And we're good. We have a long experience with this, how to admit and subvert. So I find that glorious because that's the honesty of the Bible. Otherwise, it would simply be Disney World in text. You know, a glorious image of wouldn't it be lovely if everyone did blah, 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 blah. You forget it. But it warns us. This is what we will do to the vision splendid.
You mentioned underneath that question from Diego and Jasmine's, I think part of what they're getting at in asking about kind of the specificity about our own present is what's the purchase of the Sabbath vision when thinking about the present. And it seems to me that one of the gifts of reading Genesis 1 is like a theological overture to Torah is that it's giving a Sabbath vision that's descriptive as opposed to prescriptive. And now we go, oh, well, you know, this happened in the Bible, therefore here's our economic policy or something like that. And that those of us who, if we are keeping the Sabbath holy, part of it is keeping the vision alive and engaging our civilization where we find ourselves on terms of it. But like, you know, if you're reading what's implied in their questions, it seems that the Sabbath vision of creation is that creation is not a natural resource for our own exploitation. Human beings aren't human resources for our own exploitation, but carry their own dignity and worth. The goal is not control. The means is not violence or just constant growth. And security is not established through domination. Like when we think of how our civilization and the alphabet of problems that Dom ended the lecture with, a lot of them are casting a vision of civilization where creation becomes our resources and people become means to ends. And our goal is control, thinking of like what we're doing with algorithm and surveillance and the military industrial complex and making sure people are in debt slavery coming out of undergrad and then getting rid of, like, you start to look at it and go, oh, the Sabbath vision is ultimately, it's like it invites us to be so compelling that then it makes sense that we call someone who said, love your enemies, our Savior and Lord, because it's like, what does in the midst of civilization it look like to behold the Sabbath vision? And there are a couple questions like that it would be disappointing to have Dom here not get to talk about Jesus. And so I'm going to grab one of the Jesus ones, Dom, but you do whatever. But Priya, who I know, she has been in a number of our classes and always sends really good questions. She said, you interpret Jesus' command to love your enemies specifically as advocacy for nonviolent resistance. Can you explain this interpretation and why you see nonviolent resistance as the only viable response to escalatory violence?
Thank you, Priya. By the way, Trip, thank you very much for all the work involved in putting up those questions there. I really appreciate it. It's very helpful for everyone, I'm sure. Okay, here we go. We have good old Leviticus. I'll start there. Leviticus chapter 19. Love your neighbor as yourself. We all know it. Now, a couple of verses later, it says, and we don't quote this nearly as often, love the resident alien as yourself. You know, that's close to everyone. But along comes Jesus. And this is, I think, the most assuredly thing that Jesus ever said, according to the Jesus seminar. Why didn't he simply say, love everyone? That includes your enemies. Love everyone. Why did Jesus pick on enemies? How does he know we're going to have enemies? So the only way that makes sense to me of Jesus doing that, rather than simply saying love everyone, which you would ask, is that is Jesus's slogan way, motto way of saying what we call nonviolent resistance. That's how you love your enemy, by resisting them nonviolently. You do not go along with it in every way possible, short of getting yourself killed if you can, depending on your country. You resist. You resist, first of all, internally. I do not agree with this. This is not right. You rhetorically, maybe you're able to tell parables. Maybe you talk about Jesus. I'm not talking about anyone else. I'm just talking about Jesus. I'm talking about the Roman Empire. What do you mean I'm talking about America? I never mentioned America or anything else, rhetorically, or maybe demonstrations. However you do it, you actually resist. That's the only way that makes sense to me. Now, why does Jesus presume we'll have enemies? You know, if we're such lovely people, wouldn't everyone love us? Jesus going around, patting little babies and stuff, telling little stories. We are advocating, the term I'm using, the kind of, for therapeutic shock, is post-civilization. We're trying to imagine what it would be like post-civilization, because we're getting to the point that it seems civilization is the problem, not just the Romans or the Medes or the Persians or or the Americans or the Chinese or the Russians. They're just like manifestations of something. They're serious. I don't mean that at all. They are the current manifestation of it. But they are, of course, now with the possibility of destroying the whole world, which was never there before. So here's the question, if I could say. How do you people think, if you're taking on a new civilization, that the old civilization is going to go quietly into that good night? Do you really think it will say, oh, we're sorry, we never thought of that, roll over, you go right ahead? Of course, there'll be opposition. Of course. And Paul, when he looks at the execution of Jesus, said, of course, it's the manifestation of the savage heart of civilization, if I quote him in Romans. And if the Romans really knew what they were doing, of course they wouldn't have executed them, because it reveals their savage core. Oops. That's Paul's understanding of it. So love your enemies. The only way I can make sense of it, without saying, well, it's, it's kind of nice. Don't take it seriously. Just think of it as a nice idea. This is nonviolent resistance as the destiny, salvation of the human race. It may not work. Then the alternative is escalatory violence.
Yeah. Here, let me do. There are two questions on stuff we haven't talked about, Tim, and then you can wrap up with whatever.
That sounds great. This is, okay. I mean, I'm chewing on all this. This is great.
Yeah. All right. So Zara asked, if original sin's about violence rather than sexuality or pride, how do we address other forms of human brokenness like addiction, mental illness, or relational dysfunction?
No, and honestly, Zara, I'm very much aware that this, for somebody who's involved in this, they might say, oh, this is, I'm not interested in this. I'm trying desperately to save this child. I'm trying desperately. Please don't let the wider problem obscure or denigrate in any way a problem like that. But do watch how much the way we handle the wider problem feeds into and is the matrix for handling everything else. If, for example, the way you handle everything is by violence, then of course you send the military into the streets of Chicago. What else do you do? So I want to watch it. I want to watch it in schools where keep it very general. I know the teachers who are working with children who have serious problems. I'm watching how funding comes in there. Now, all of a sudden, whether this child who is, let's say, severely autistic, let me put it just for an example, keep it vague, is not going to get any help. The funding is gone. I mean, it's up to the parents. It's up to somebody else. It's not up to. So I want you to watch how much the normalcy of civilization, as I've defined it, feeds into everything else, including spousal abuse, for example, or anything else you can even think of. Watch very carefully how it may be getting worse because of something much bigger than itself. Now, that may not be much of a consolation, but please don't think, oh, all of this is a local question and all of that stuff is just, it's too ethereal, wide, biblical, something or other, nothing to do with me. Yeah, it does have something to do with you. But it doesn't in no way says, well, don't have to worry about that. That's a small thing. No. That's an absolute incarnation. As the Roman Empire was the incarnation of civilization in the first century, as Jesus was the incarnation of a program and a vision. That's what Jesus was. If you say, well, I'm not interested in historical Jesus, then be interested in the program or the vision. I'd prefer to use a wider term, in the vision.
Yeah. Yeah, that actually is similar. Gerard in the chat said, is not what we have always called civilization the opposite of what we understood as the kingdom of God?
Well, I want to be very careful, because if somebody says the kingdom of God, I want to know, are they talking about heaven, to put it bluntly? Because, for example, in the Greek of the Our Father, it says, as in heaven, so on earth. Heaven is coming down to earth in the Jewish vision. Even in the last book, the book of Revelation, we ain't going off to heaven. Heaven's coming down to earth. Read it, the last chapters. Heaven's coming down to earth. We reversed it in the English. On earth as it is in heaven. Do you ever realize that? We took the Greek text of Matthew and we reversed it in English quietly. And maybe it means nothing. But when I hear on earth as in heaven, I think on earth as in heaven. On earth now as in heaven in the future. On earth now as we get to heaven. That's not the Jewish and early Christian vision. Heaven's in great shape. Very well run. Administration is first rate. Every angel gets the same cereal in the morning. It's in great shape. Distributive justice is perfect in heaven. We're trying to bring that down to earth. No complaints from the angels. Well, there was a while to make it interesting, because otherwise heaven is a bore if you don't have Satan every now and then. That's melting you. But you see my point. Just a simple thing like, as in heaven, so on earth as in heaven. Why do we change stuff? So it's about down here on earth. The kingdom of God means, what would it be like if God sat, using that, on Caesar's throne? Put it in American terms, what would a federal budget drawn up by God look like? What would your priorities be and everything else? That's the local equivalent of the kingdom of God. What would the United Nations be like if God was running it?
Do you think Doge would start with feeding starving people, or the military-industrial complex?
Oh yeah, Doge is not the solution. We recognize, I hope, what intensifies the problem.
I don't know. I was told by some people that it's cutting that government waste.
One of the things about and maybe this can help kind of play out that dynamism, right? I think it was Marcus Borg, your longtime friend and partner, who would make the quip when talking about it, like, God has heaven pretty well under control, and earth is where the problem is. That's why you're praying for that, like the whole coming thing. And
That's right.
one of the parables that we talked about maybe a couple years ago was the wheat and the tares one. And how, yes, like, we're in every person's born into some point in history. There's all of the challenges of civilization and such. And any one person, especially someone that's not seeking to bow to Satan and become the new Caesar, right, isn't going to be in control and can just actualize everything they want without a collaborative, cooperative community. But when you think of that kind of that there's the wheat and the tares going on, and you let them grow up, in many ways is like, yes, you're invested in the coming of the kingdom of God, and acting it, making way, collaborating, and like, you don't get to separate yourself from the where you find yourself in civilization. And so there's always going to be this negotiation of sort taking place for the people, for the followers of Jesus, and having to kind of both reflect on the world as it is in light of this vision of the Sabbath or the vision of the kingdom, and then be strategic in actualizing an alternative in some spaces and engaging what is to transform it in others. And so I wonder how Jesus' own experience in the way the kingdom vision gets articulated in his parables and in his ministry can help us think about what it's like to be an active participant in the coming of God's justice in a civilization where the tares are becoming ever more visible for us.
Yep. Okay. It's rather fascinating. It's also in the sower parable, and it's also in the mustard seed. How calm Jesus is with it's small, but it'll grow. How calm Jesus is. Well, there'll be 3 types of losses, but there's 3 types of gains. Don't get uptight. I don't know what Jesus would say or what Paul would say if you said, now you do know this thing is going to run for 2,000 years and counting. Paul had the consolation that he thought it would be over more or less within his own lifetime. I don't think that invalidates his vision, quite frankly. I don't think it does, because the vision is right. How long you think? But it does kind of warn us that we really have a choice to make that is pressing on us without going apocalyptic. I have some people I've been reading who say, well, see, Paul was right. Paul said God was going to destroy the world, and we're going to do it. So he was right. No, nobody in the first century ever imagined or could imagine that God would destroy the world, and only God could do it, and God wouldn't do it because that would be embarrassing. That would mean God blew it with creation. That would be like calling the car back to the factory, which admits you blew it. So no way could God destroy the world. What God would destroy is what they would call, in quotation marks, this world, or this evil aeon, or what I'm calling civilization. So they do have an imagination of how, in collaboration with God then. So we're not just waiting for God to do it for us. Oh, I thought God was going to do it. It was a matter of prayer, hope, wait, patience. The message of Jesus is it's a participation. It's a collaboration. God's waiting for you. So if nothing happens, well, then civilization wins.
Dom, as expected, you give all of us a lot to think about and to chew on from so many different angles. I think my last question is back to Jesus for a second, right? I mean, I identify as a Christ follower, as a Christian, right? And I just wonder for you, I guess I kind of have my questions maybe twofold. I'm not sure how close you track the current iteration of Christian nationalism in American politics, but it's got to drive you mad to watch people claim to represent Christ and this kingdom of God, so to speak, and are advocating for the military industrial complex, for funding the bombs that are getting dropped on the heads of children in Gaza, etc. I mean, we could be here all day listing out all the things. And I'm wondering, for other Christians out there who are thinking to themselves, like, what do I do? How do I represent the way of Jesus faithfully in 2025, understanding that I live in a whole different world in some ways than where Christ lived, but also realizing that a lot of the same patterns are at play, right? The same patterns of power and of violence and empire. I'm just kind of curious because I do like pragmatism, to be honest. I do like, where can we take this and somehow implement it? How do you think about this as someone who's maybe, one of the best sources of understanding Jesus in the scriptures? How do you see the teachings of Jesus implicating Christians today? And what do you say to the Christians who have called themselves followers of Christ, but really are more like followers of empire?
To be honest with you, for the last, since the historical Jesus in 1991, I have been trying rather desperately to avoid a total negative vision, totally negative, to be trapped into negativity. And it happened to me when I, left the priesthood and the monastery. I wasn't going to spend my life criticizing Roman Catholicism. No, I want to have a positive vision. But what I did see that was useful to me is Jesus seems to me to be bilingual. I'm not talking about Greek and Hebrew and Aramaic. I'm talking about he seemed to be able to talk to peasants in language they would understand, using parables, for example. I look at Paul the same way. I think Paul could talk so ordinary Romans would understand what he was saying and therefore want him killed. If they didn't understand him, of course, he'd be quite safe. But they would understand that rule of God was what they were running. That was their program. So I've been trying to ask people, let's be bilingual. If we're talking within the Christian tradition, then we use exactly the Christian language. And I have no problem with it. Let me be very clear about that. Because I understand it in this first century matrix. I understand when Paul says Son of God, what Paul meant. And what maybe the 4th century was different. Anyway, we have to be bilingual. We have to be able to speak in the public square and in let's say, the church sanctuary, to keep it simple. I think Jews have to do the same thing, and so do Muslims. They'll have to learn how to do it. To speak a language that does not say, well, you're talking about God and the Bible and Jesus. I don't care about any of those people, really. In fact, I had to fight my way out of them. They found they were bad for me. Okay. Then could we talk what I just called twice afterwards, or the vision splendid, that it is a vision that we have to have if we are to have a future. So try and be bilingual, to be able to speak without any dishonesty. There's no dishonesty involved, because I don't know honestly today whether I got the Bible from the Bible and then I saw it in terms of evolution, let's say, or I got it from evolution and then saw it clearly in the Bible. I saw it in terms of the human species and what we were doing. And I found it in both places. And so I would ask people to try and be bilingual. Convince yourself, if you can, that this is something we have to do. It's not a quaint little Christian thing that everyone would say, well, you're sweet and that's your little vision and you have every right to have your vision. By all means, yep, you have your lovely little Jesus, and of course, but you've nothing to do with reality. We have more to do with reality than Doge and all the rest of them, because that's not the future. It may be the next 100 years, but it ain't the future. And I'm saying that both as a Christian, working from a Bible-based Christianity, and from an ordinary human being living in the world of evolution. I just can't see how we can keep this up.
Yeah.
And it's not prophecy, it's trajectory.
Yeah.
And trajectories can be wrong, of course. We did this, this, and this, and we could do completely the opposite. But if you just look at the trajectory of what we have done, that 3,000 years, I think what we got with that warning in Genesis 4, that here's what you guys do. So I would hope if people can be persuaded of it, that it's not some quaint idea, certainly not just a quaint Crossan idea. Well, you know, he's Irish, so he's weird. So, but yeah, let him have his little say, and then we can get on with reality. No, take it very seriously. If this is serious, then we have to convince ourselves of it. And if we are convinced, then I would hope we will know what to do.
Yeah. So, Tim, that question and Dom's response is one of the things I'm most excited about at Theology Beer Camp this year, because Dom is going to do his keynote is on the groaning of creation in the biblical narrative. And then Philip Clayton, who was my advisor, but, you know, he's the editor for the Oxford Encyclopedia of Science and Religion, written lots of science and religion textbooks and such. He's going to tell the story of the cosmos scientifically and leading up to our crises that we face of civilization. And then in another session, they will have an hour-and-a-half conversation together about what are the angles and questions and such that each of these narratives bring to give insight to the other. And then what are ways for people of faith who embrace the wisdom and vision of science and receive as an invitation the Sabbath vision and the kingdom vision of Jesus. What does it look like to not set those stories against each other, but for both of those stories to speak into us, because our cosmic story is one that we're a part of and our faith story is. And which that cool idea was Dom's idea when he was telling me, you know, when he was working on that connection. And then I was like, oh, it would be amazing to get Phil there. They both said yes. So like that question is really intuiting something I know that's important to Dom, and that question channels what a lot of people are feeling. So that's one of the reasons I'm super pumped about camp this year.
I'm pumped too.
Can I put a postscript to that?
Yeah.
Sorry. You had asked me to do the camp talk, and you'd asked me to do this talk. So what I had to do really in my own mind, okay, now I don't want to say the same thing. So I really saw this lecture and as a visual lecture, and the one in the camp will also be a visual lecture, as a prelude to the groaning of creation. They run right straight into one another. I had to kind of separate my mind. Okay, no, this goes here. No, I don't want to say the same over here, because they go together as far as I'm concerned. The biblical tradition or the evolutionary tradition. Sorry.
Yeah. I'm excited for that. Again, like, you know, this is so different for me, the way I think about this stuff. So it's really helpful. And I think hearing the scientific and then this other view kind of in dialogue with each other, and how they overlap and how they might differ, and how maybe they're answering different questions is just super, it's fascinating. It reminds me kind of, Trip, of when you had Ilya Delio last year at Beer Camp, and she did this like origin of how we understood God like throughout history, and it just blew my mind. It was one of those things where it's like, this is the stuff that I want more of in my life. It was fantastic.
Well, you know, Ilya is just rather entertaining in general, on top of being brilliant. And you know, Dom, I think that like when you're a person religious and you drop a joke, it just gets amplified, right? So when a nun tells a slightly suggestive joke with a science punchline and an invitation to collaborate with our species to bring mutual flourishing, it just lands. It's cheating. It's like I just need to put it on a collar to be able to get away with such high quality responses.
We also had her in a TikTok trending video with us that we did, and having her in the background doing the dance was just, it was perfect.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm super excited about it, and thank you, Dom, for being the first to join us in the conversations that we're going to be having around God and justice. Any of you that have been watching live want to go watch Dom's lecture along with a host of others, you can go to faithandpolitics.net And with that, we'll say bye for now. If you joined in the middle of it, you can watch, just use the same link. You will be able to rewatch this. Everyone in the class, it'll be on the resource page. And then, check out the lecture for next week and send questions just like y'all did this time. And we'll have some fun. So
Can't wait. Thanks, Tom. Great seeing you again.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Trip. Thank